So, good day and welcome to everyone to WriteHive 2022. I am one of your moderators here, Tim Baughman Jr., and I have the pleasure of speaking with one of the guests of honor here for this year's event, that being Alechia Dow. Alechia Dow is a former librarian, pastry chef, living abroad with her partner in Germany. When she's not writing, you can find her having epic dance parties with her daughter, baking, reading, or taking teeny adventures around Europe. Do you want to take a moment and say hi?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and I can't wait to talk and get into it.
Well, I won't belabor the point, and I'll start asking questions so that you can do the fancy words talking thing that you're here to do. So first and foremost, you've published a pair of books to this point, those being The Sound of Stars and The Kindred. For those who are in attendance who might not be familiar with your work, what makes your books, whichever of them you want to talk about or both, the next things that they should add to their to-be-read list?
Okay, so The Sound of Stars is about a rebel librarian and a music-loving alien on a road trip to possibly save humanity. And The Kindred is about a mind-linked duke and a peasant who crash land on Earth after getting framed for the murder of the royal family. And they have to figure out what they mean to each other and how to save their kingdom. Both of which are in the same universe. And they are YA, they are sci-fi fantasy, they have romance. And I think what makes them kind of stand out, I think, is that they are kind of an introduction to science fiction. They are very, I think, and I hope that they are accessible, and they feel like you're dipping your toe into that kind of water. And it's really, really fun and hopeful, and I had a blast writing.
So as a science fiction writer and reader myself, one of the things that caught my attention the most in your books is specifically the premise behind The Kindred. And because you just talked about the thing I want to address now, I don't think this is spoilers, but if anyone is really concerned, plug your ears and start la-la-la-ing now, I guess. And that's the concept of these mind-linked pairings between two people. And I don't necessarily know that is, a novel concept. I'm sure that it's been explored in things like Star Trek and whatnot in the past. But I find it fascinating, both from a technological and philosophical standpoint. What inspired you to go that specific route with that concept?
I was watching something late at night on German TV, as one does.
Yeah.
And it was a documentary about loneliness and how technology will eventually find a way to kind of remedy loneliness, but at the same time, it contributes to it as well. So I found it really, really fascinating. I thought, what if somebody was connected to you all the time? You would never really be lonely. What if that was a way that technology would be used so that you wouldn't experience loneliness? And then what if it was another way to kind of combat classism,
Mhm.
and how you would always feel like you had a voice, that somebody was listening, that somebody was on the other side? There would be no judgment. You would be sharing all of your memories and experiences together. You would adapt to one another. You would change one another. It would be a truly beautiful relationship. It could also be a horror story, but it could
Right.
be it could be really lovely. And that's where it kind of snowballed from there. It was just, I really love the idea of how you could use technology to combat loneliness, and what it would be like if you were connected to someone else all the time.
So even though it is very much a science fiction concept, do you think that it is something on the societal horizon to have that kind of technology at some point in the not too distant future?
I think, like, what is there? The neural link,
Mhm.
they're already trying to get that going, which I'm not sure is a good idea, but
Sure, we could discuss ethical implications all day.
Um, but it wouldn't be too dissimilar either, would it? It would be like if you were able to have that a chip in your mind, and you could constantly go through your own memories and all these things, and you could share that, and you could like use it to put your memory up on a screen or something like this, then I imagine that that would be on the horizon to have that connection. I'm not sure, again, it's a good thing, but
Sure.
I can imagine that it would be possible eventually.
So you said that obviously in the context of the Kindred, this is, it's one perspective of how a linking like that could happen, and the relationship between the two characters in the story, and in other situations that could end up being a not so positive experience. Now, the Sound of Stars, Kindred, they take place in the same universe as you said. A is there another universe book that is that horror story that you talked about, where there's this kindred linking that becomes very bad, that's stumbling around in your mind?
So, well, the thing was, it's very similar to The Sound of Stars. In The Sound of
Mhm,
Stars, there is an alien race called the Alluri,
mhm.
and there are the true Alluri, who are like these immortal, powerful beings who are kind of bored with everything and just colonize. They just take over, they colonize, they're not good. And then instead of, getting their hands dirty, they decide to create armies in labs. And those armies have like are connected to Illicom, which is like a giant hive, right?
Mhm.
And instead of, them always communicating with each other, which they can, they're also using energy.
Okay.
So it's like they're constantly giving energy to to the true Lori, and that's how the true Lori keep themselves nourished all the time, is by eating this energy from their lab mates. It's very weird. It's very kind of parasite kind of,
Sure.
and that would be the bad way of using it. Um, they can't control their own thoughts. They can easily be overtaken. It's not in a they're not in a good position at all. And I loved writing that because it was, it had a lot of different parallels to things that are going on now, and also that it's the dark side of technology and what it could be used to do by people who have already so much power and resources.
So one of the things that um is very evident, and I think science fiction writers as a whole kind of exemplify this, there is a lot of inspiration that comes from other media just kind of naturally. And you talk about your late night driven TV binging giving you ideas. Is there any specific show, movie, whatever it may be, that really it has driven not necessarily specific themes in your book, although feel free to talk that if you wish, but like just how you frame technology within your books as you work through them?
I think they all kind of come together, don't they? I When I started writing, I didn't know how much Blade Runner meant to me until I was writing, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that has made an impact on me." Just
Mhm.
like Fifth Element did as well. There was something really goofy and fun about Fifth Element that was, it's the future, but it's also really funny, and, you know, I had a lot of fun with that. But then there's also Star Trek, and there's also Black Mirror, which is definitely
Yes.
always, mostly 99% of the time, the dark side of technology, which you enjoy watching, but you're also like, ooh, uncomfortable the entire time. Um, and there was Sense8 as well that came out, and I would be remiss to say that Star Wars didn't have an effect as well, because I grew up with all of that. And my favorite growing up was X-Men.
Okay.
So it was like all of these things come together in a really nice way, and I think my style has always kind of been toward that goofy sci-fi, which is
Mhm.
accessible in Fifth Element style, but then all these other things have crept in over the years as well. So it's just I'm always adapting, but then I'm when I'm reading about what I've done, and usually when somebody sends me like a review of my book, um, I'm like, "Ah, that was smart. What was I thinking there? Well done for me."
Right.
Because you're so in the forest when you're writing these things, and then
Mhm.
eventually something's gonna click afterwards where you're like, "I see it through the trees now. I understand what I was doing. I just didn't fully grasp it when I was doing it." So It's been fun, and I'm glad that there are so many different sci-fi avenues that I can look at and I can take from and I can be inspired by. Um, and it's been really that I'm really lucky for that. I think sci-fi is one of those things where people are like, "Oh, sci-fi is dying," or "There's not enough of it," or "It's
Oh
this and
no.
that," but not really. I
Right.
mean, a lot of the things that are doing well, especially movie-wise and show-wise, like Mandalorian and all of this, they're doing extremely well. But on sci-fi with books is like it's hard to find your place in it, and
Mhm.
people constantly tell you that it just doesn't sell or it just isn't this or it isn't that, and it's hard, so you just have to find that accessible way in and then get people interested. And I think if they already love the Marvel universe or they love this or that, they will. You just have to get it out there.
Right. Yeah. Admittedly, I was when you were kind of describing the kindred and the whole concept of this is your way around loneliness. I was waiting for you to reference San Junipero from Black Mirror in there because, like, as I was reading through it, it very much felt like that in a way. Um, Albeit not like it's not literally that, but it had that kind of vibe to it in a certain way. And now that you describe, it's like, okay, yeah, I absolutely see where you're potentially coming from on that. Um, you brought up another point before I get back into my next question. Um, Sci-fi writers, and yeah, I say this both for myself, somebody who writes sci-fi and dystopia, but also because I know that there are people that are going to be listening to this that they are wanting to be sci-fi writers. And like I said, it is a hard field to set yourself apart in. What advice do you have for folks in terms of finding their voice within sci-fi, even if they don't necessarily know like explicitly what they want their niche to be? How do you find your voice in that realm?
I think really it comes down to being inspired and just trying it out. Just going into it and knowing that there's no wrong way to do it. It really is about finding your voice and just keep going until you do.
Mhm.
Um, and that it is hard. I mean, I struggled. I think I wrote 2 to 3 books before I wrote The Sound of Stars, and none of them, they're all shelved and they won't ever see anyone. That's done.
Sure.
But those 2 books helped me get to where I was. So it has been a real process and also learning from different media. I think when you look at something, and I'm going to go back to Mandalorian,
Mhm.
you look at Mandalorian and it's so heavy. It could be so heavy in lore. It could be so heavy in everything that was Star Wars and the Skywalkers, but instead it goes a different route and it sets itself up on this nice little circuit and it knows what it's doing and it has its very unique style and it works. And I think you have to apply that to your own books. You have to be like, okay, I'm going to write sci-fi, but how do I carve that out for myself? And it really is the idea, understanding how sci-fi works, and then being inspired by other different sci-fi media, and then just doing it. You can't go wrong. You just have to keep trying.
So another piece of inspiration you talk about just heavily in your books is obviously music. And your books, especially the Sound of Stars, have a lot of music within them. Um, how does music specifically influence your creative process, be it broadly or just like individually within a book or within a chapter, or however it may influence you directly?
I love music. My dad is a musician. My grandfather was a musician. Um, I I was a musician at one point. Um, so I write a lot with music in the background, and I can listen to classical and I can listen to word music and all those different genres. It doesn't matter to me.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that within sci-fi, there's this. If you're trying to create a bridge between you and a contemporary like world building
Mhm.
and a universe, music is that thing that is the bridge. Because if you're taking 2 people who are from different galaxies and everything, how they understand and hear vibrations is going to be very similar, I would hope, I think. So that was my thought process of using music within sci-fi because it's that great connector. And I think it helps be more relevant, and it also helps people feel like they're seen and represented, and they like these same things. Um, yeah, I use it all the time to just write. It's always going on in the background. It's like my thing that I need to hear. I have to like have music all the time,
Sure.
for better or for worse, but I do.
Is there a particular, since you mentioned classical, is there a particular composer or, era of music that you listen to if you really need to focus on getting writing?
So when I'm writing and I'm like really into it, I listen to a lot of Max Richter because I think Max Richter is amazing and also has some creepy works in there.
Sure.
Um, but I also love film scores because they really help and they set a scene as well. And I think like Interstellar and all of these other things really like help you vibe to whatever you're writing. If you're writing sci-fi, it really helps you get in the zone.
When aliens eventually discover Earth, what do you think they'll think of the chicken dance?
Like humans, why? Why?
So you talk about this on your website a bit. However, your journey to becoming an author, at least to me, doesn't necessarily come across as a linear one. You've been a pastry chef, you've been a librarian. I'm sure there's been a litany of things you've done along the way, as really anyone has. What advice would you give to writers who are looking to follow a similar path as you and make a transition from X day job, whatever it is, to becoming fancy writer person that gets to talk to people?
I don't know if I am a fancy right person who gets to talk to
Just
people.
hold your pinky up.
um, I think you find your way in by for me, okay, I started writing when I was like a kid. I
Mhm.
went into food science and I was a food writer and I was a pastry chef and I did all of these things. And I always wrote. They weren't always good. Most of the time they weren't good actually. And then I took a class when I was a librarian at the Brooklyn Public Library about how to create your own comic book hero.
Okay.
And I had a great time with that, and it just kind of opened up this world to me where I thought, "Oh, maybe I can do something like this. I don't know. Let's see what happens." And so I started writing books, and that was really my way in is I started writing books. I realized there's a huge writing community online. So I kind of got into that, and I met my critique partner. I made friends who were just starting out like me. We relied heavily on each other, and we kind of found our individual voices and then started querying, and one thing led to another eventually, and it got there. I don't think you need I don't want to like step on anyone here, but I don't think you need a master's of fine arts in writing in order to write. Um, you don't need that. You don't.
Sure.
I'm not even sure you need any degree at all for it. You just have to be a person who can read and take inspiration from that
Mhm.
and understand the structure of how it should be, and then you learn. It really is a whole learning process, and that's it. Like, you don't need any prerequisites other than the ability to consume media and like, inhale it and exhale it.
Right. So one of the things that um, one of the things that you just kind of given as a common thread in your answers is obviously being able to take your influences and manipulate them, shape them, whatever it may be, into your own voice as you write. I think that most writers, if not all writers, in part, write part of what they want to see as a reader in their own writing. What are some of the things, be it concepts, tropes, ideas, whatever it may be, that you try to work in as a writer because you know it makes you feel fulfilled as a reader to see them?
Well, usually it's representation. For me, it's representation completely. I mean, when I was younger, I loved all of these different things and I loved reading, but they didn't have, fat black queer girls in there
Right,
doing things. That didn't exist in a way.
right.
And I get to do that now, and that's like the coolest thing ever. So I get to add these little things that I know that people might want or people might need, and teens and children might want and might need. And that makes me feel really, really good and extremely honored at the same time. And I always, I'm definitely cognizant of how I'm doing this and what I'm doing and if I'm doing it right. And there's always that kind of mental loop of like, oh my God, am I doing it right? Am I going to mess this up? Am I going to hurt anybody? Am I going to offend anyone? And then it's just pulling back and letting it letting it go.
Sure.
Um, and that's been my process so far. And it's worked out because I do write the things that I really enjoy reading. And I never read my own book after at all. I don't look at them. That's done for me. But I always hope that readers are going to find it and love it and feel like it's relatable to their lives and that they feel seen by it.
Sure. And I think one advantage that you have, just in terms of having read through stuff, is that it becomes, I don't want to say easier because I don't know that the work is necessarily easy, but it becomes more practical to put in the things you just talked about, the things you want to see, be it representation, be it whatever. If you have a base story, an idea that is sound and you're interested in, and you obviously speak very passionately about sci-fi, about the just the things that you like seeing, and I think that comes through in your books just as much as anything else, like that you obviously care about the genre, and obviously there's those things that are practical and important to you as well. And I think that the representation obviously is critical, but the fact that you also are this person who very much values sci-fi as this art form, it comes through there as well.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I want to make sure I ask before we go too long here is, if you can, tell us about your current projects. Obviously you may need to be vague. If you need me to sign an NDA before you answer, I have no paper, but what are you working on currently?
So the next book in the Sound of Stars universe will be out next year, and it is called A Song of Salvation. And I don't know if I can say too much about it, but what I can say is that if you are looking for a conclusion to that universe, this should be it. And it is the first two take place on Earth quite a lot, even though it's like aliens.
Sure.
The last one will be not on Earth a lot. It will be a space opera, and it will be a joyous, fun, powerful. It is a ride. I had a lot of fun with this. It was also one of the most difficult books I've ever written. But I had afterwards, I'm like extremely proud of it. So there is that, and that should be coming out summer 2023. And then in the fall of 2023, I have my first middle grade, which is called Just a Pinch of Magic. And that is a story about two girls who are enchanters or food like food witches.
Okay.
And and it is a lot of fun, and it's magical, and it's like the Parent Trap meets practical magic, and it's lots of fun and food, and it's
Okay,
just
I have to ask, what's a food witch?
well, in my book they're called enchanters, and they're people who can use a spell to create, like, help them create desserts and foods and breads
Okay.
and all these things. Yeah. And it's just, in my book, it's these spells, and then they add emotions to the food. So if you're going into a shop and you need like to stay up late, it's like, you've got energizing eclairs, and you can eat those and stay up for like 2 days. So it's really, really fun. After that, then there's the Cookie Crumbles, which is another middle grade, which I wrote with my really good friend, Tracy Badua. And it is a whodunit
Okay.
in a cookie competition. And it is super fun. And I had a real blast writing that as well.
Well, I could use some energizing eclairs, or at the very least a depressed turducken. So going on to the food thing, you are a former pastry chef. My wife is former pastry chef, and just kind of being around her, I've met a lot of folks who have worked in pastry shops, whatever it may be over time. And there's one thing they all seem to have an extremely strong opinion about, and I want to know yours. What do you think about fondant?
Oh, I hate fondant. Oh, I hate it completely. And it's funny because you watch all of these cooking shows and they're all like, I'm just gonna make something out of fondant. And you're like, no, it doesn't taste good and it's a weird flavor and it doesn't, it's the texture is off. Like I will avoid using it at all costs and I don't believe in it at all.
Every single pastry chef I talk to either detests it or they think it's cool because of the sculpting capabilities of it.
Yeah.
And there is no in between. And thank you for further proving my point.
Like I feel really strong. I think if you're gonna eat a cake, you should enjoy it. And I don't think fondant ever adds to it. It's pretty,
Sure.
but it doesn't add to the flavor. And that just throws me off completely.
So I have one final question. And I think all the interviews that are going on, for guest honor panels, whatever it may be, are asking this question. So I'll ask it to you. WriteHive's tagline is "Writing the future we need." What does that look like to you?
Inclusive. I think writing the future we need is also writing the future we want to have, and also writing the present as it is and making it better. Um, I know that's a weird answer, but I really do think if we start writing books that are inclusive and reflect the world, at least how it's compromised, how it's comprised, um, I think it will be better for the future, and I really do believe that. We have to move away from writing one singular idea and just opening the doors for many, and
Mhm.
opening the doors to people who have not traditionally been allowed to write books. So I'm excited to see when more doors are opened up for people, what comes out, what art is being made, because I am already super impressed with all the things that are coming out in the upcoming years.
Mhm.
And I know it's just going to get better, and it's going to broaden everyone's horizons, and it's just going to normalize all the things that people are unsure about now. And I really think it could have an impact on censorship, and it could have an impact on all these things. We just have to really put our support behind it.
All right. Well, that's the last question I had for sake of the pure interview part of this session. If you're watching this the day of, we'll open up to questions momentarily. But before we do that, Alechia, anything you want to plug, say, shout into the void, whatever it may be for the group?
No, not really. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. No, I'm writing a lot of books. You can always find me online. I'm on Twitter. I have a website that's my name. Um, I don't know. That's all I've got. If you want to support more sci-fi books, definitely just keep checking out sci-fi books and shouting about them. There are plenty. There are so many good books. Just try them all.
I'm willing to support sci-fi by shouting, so I'm glad that there's someone else with that. So if you are watching this live, we'll open up for Q&A here shortly. But if you're watching it recorded, thank you. I want to thank Alechia Dow for taking time to talk to us. And I think we'll move on to the Q&A session.
Thank you.